Okay guys, this is going to be part 2 of our skeletal system presentation, so if you have not seen part 1, please watch that video before watching this one so you get a more, generalized feeling of what's going on. So we're going to begin this video talking about the cells of bone. They all begin with the prefix osteo, and osteo just means bone, alright? So we're going to start talking about the osteogenic cells, and those are the bone stem cells. These are like the primary cells that is the source for all of the other bone cells, alright? Next is our osteoblasts, and these are our bone-forming cells. They are the producers of fibers, fluid, and bone matrix. Now, osteocytes next are the cells that mature bone, and they also stabilize bone, allowing it to be maintained as a true tissue, all right? And lastly, our osteoclasts. These are, responsible for resorbing bone, breaking it down, and it allows for remodeling or recreation of bone tissue. We have a more microscopic view of compact bone, and within it we have something called a osteon, which is also referred to as an haversian system, okay? Now, osteons, they act as a weight-bearing pillar, so they allow us to stand or withstand any force, all right? And there are numerous amounts of these osteons, okay? They are long and also they are cylindrical in shape, so there's another term called lamellae. Now, this is the rings of bone matrix that forms the osteons, all right? And there are two types of lamellae, our circumferential lamellae, and we have our interstitial lamellae, okay? So the circumferential lamellae is the more circular ones we see around single osteons, circular, okay? Interstitial is the more, scattered, they're incomplete, and they're lodged between all the circles. So they just fill in the gaps, and they're also composed of collagen fibers, and that provides even more support that we do need. When we get a more close-up view, and in between you can see the interstitial lamellae, and the more circular one you can see around the osteon, even coming out of the image. But again, we see that there are numerous osteons, guys. So it's important to make note of that. In the midst of all these osteons, there's a hollow center named the central canal, or the haversian canal, okay? And this is what consists of the blood vessels and nerves that we see. So parallel to the central canal, we see what is called the Volkmann's Canal, okay? And they run side by side, and it is vital for connecting the periosteum, which is the outside layer of the bone. You see that little to your bottom right, there is that little sheath. It is the outside layer. It connects that to the osteons, okay? So it allows the bone to work as, one individual system. Lacunae, which was recently discussed when we were looking over cartilage, all right? So lacunae we find in cartilage and in bone matrix. Now, within the cartilage, there were chondrocytes that sit in the lacunae. Here in bone, we're going to find osteocytes, all right? So the prefix just changed just to tell you what kind of cells are in there. Is it cartilage or is it bone? Now, the central canal and the Volkmann's canal play separate roles within compact bone, and they are connected by tiny cracks or canals called canaliculi. Trust me, I know, they could have done better. Anyhow, you can see that these tiny cracks, the canaliculi, they breach out and eventually connect to the lacunae on either side. This allows also for the bone to work as one unit. We move on to the chemical structure or composition of bone. So this consists of both organic and inorganic compounds. So the organic compounds is that of our bone cells, which we've already discussed, okay? That would be the osteoblasts, the osteoclasts, and so forth. And then there's a substance called osteoid. An osteoid is just an organic component of fluid matrix, and it has both proteins and fibers, which is built by osteoblasts. The osteoblasts are those bone-forming cells, guys. Remember that. Now, moving on to the inorganic components. They are termed mineral salts, all right? And I've already discussed this in the previous video, but calcium phosphate is that inorganic component. And it's the chief component for, producing that calcified matrix or hardness inside of our bones. Bone growth. And when it comes to bone growth, a hormone called growth hormone, which is excessive, is secreted by our pituitary gland. And this triggers, bone growth. You got it. Now, also at puberty in males and in females, their hormones will trigger growth spurts. Now, males have the testosterone and females have the estrogen. Now, eventually this levels us off at where we are. So I've been about 6'4" since I was 19. I haven't grown much since, but hey, I'm not complaining. One, but two, when I was 19 and I took A&P, I was thinking, okay, I got 2 more years to grow, which is pretty cool. But psych, I didn't grow an inch, guys. Sometimes you just got to take what you got. Bone deposit refers to the formation of new bone, or osteoblasts, now secreting new matrix, all right? So you can think for a second, you go to the bank to deposit cash. So you're building the account. That's bone deposit. We're depositing, okay? As for bone resorption, this just means we're resorbing bone, taking that cash out, which in turn makes way for new cash, all right? We're not about that old money, we with the new money. Surprisingly enough, though, osteoclasts, which are the resorbers of bone, they secrete hydrochloric acid, HCl, and this helps dissolve calcium salts and the enzymes, hence breaking it down. And yeah, that's how we remodel bone. Get it? Got it. Alrighty, now this is pretty cool to talk about. It's the body's response to mechanical stress, or the bone's response to stress, all right? It's a law called Wolff's Law. I'm sure it's derived from a guy with the name Wolf somewhere in his name. It's not actual wolves, okay, guys? They will eat you. Anyway, Wolff's Law theorizes that bone grows and remodels according to the physical demands placed on it. Now, this just means based on how much we use our bones, the more they will develop in that need. So you can think of it like a muscle. The more you work it out, the bigger it will get. Well, that goes for parts of our bones, are the attachment sites for our bones, okay? So here, there's an example of a woman playing tennis, and the little circular diagram below her to the left, well, that represents her serving arm, okay? She uses that the most in tennis, while the diagram to the right is the non-dominant arm, or wrist. So you can see that the more dominant wrist has a thicker bone contour because, yep, she uses it more. Males, on the other hand, they use one wrist more than the other. For sports, of course, guys, for sports, okay? Now, here I have a simple drawing of fractures. So we see the displaced versus non-displaced, the complete versus the incomplete, the linear versus the transverse, and the simple versus compound. Now, displaced as seen here refers to the alignment of the fracture. Displaced is when the bone breaks and is out of alignment with the rest of bone, okay? I drew red axis marks here so you guys get the idea. When a fracture is non-displaced, on the other hand, it, as seen here, it is broken, but it remains in place or in alignment, okay? Moving over to complete versus incomplete, here we see that what's being compared is if the bone is broken straight through or not. So a complete fracture just means it's completely fractured, whereas incomplete refers to partially being fractured, not all the way through. So linear versus transverse is just comparing the orientation of the fracture, linear meaning vertical and transverse being horizontal, as seen here. Lastly, I didn't draw simple versus compound fractures because they simply refer to whether or not the fracture penetrated the skin or not. So simple fractures remain under the skin, whereas compounds penetrate the skin. So if we look at the displaced bone fracture right here, this would be an example of a compound fracture. This sharp part sticking off may penetrate the skin, classifying the fracture as a compound fracture. Now that we've talked about fractures, we're going to talk about the healing process involved, termed bone repair, okay? So after a bone is fractured, it goes through repair, and this takes about 6 to 8 weeks in a healthy young adult. Now, the first phase of bone repair is that of a hematoma, which is a localized mass of blood from a damaged vessel, all right? So the hematoma serves as a brace, coagulating or clotting the damaged site. After a while, it is cells called fibroblasts. They secrete collagen fibers, and some of these fibers become chondrocytes, remember, are cartilage cells. And these chondrocytes then secrete cartilage matrix, providing more, solidification to the surrounding. This is the stage of fibrocartilaginous callus formation, all right? So next, which is the bony callus phase, this is where spongy bone comes, evident at the fracture site. You can see that in image 3, okay? So there's no more cartilage there. There's going to be spongy bone, which is going to take over, all right? Lastly, bone remodeling takes place, and this occurs only by the help of both the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts, which form new bone tissue, as we've been talking about. And this makes way for new bone tissue. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Definitely look forward to more videos coming from me. If you haven't already hit that subscribe and thumbs up button, go ahead and do so. Feel free to follow my Instagram page for study tips, med info, and updates on what I'm posting or what I'm sharing with you guys. And let's continue to learn and have fun with it, all right? Thanks again, and see you guys next time.